Hi, I'm Dylan.
Hi, I'm Emily.
Hi, I'm Neil, and this is Youth on Subjects of the World. So today's episode, we will be interviewing and conducting another one of the interviews as we did last time with Dr. Gina Riley, which was awesome. We'll be talking to Emily Cutler. Is that your last name?
Mhm.
Awesome. So do you want to just introduce yourself, and tell everyone a little about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a Mad Pride activist. That means that I advocate for taking pride in the state's traits and characteristics that we usually categorize as mental illness. Um, I'm also an anti-force activist, so mainly dealing with forced psychiatric treatment such as involuntary commitment. And I am currently an incoming PhD student at the University of South Florida, where I'll be studying some of those topics. And I'm also an assistant editor at Mad in America, which is a critical psychiatry web magazine.
That's really cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks.
So I guess because I know I don't know.
I have a question. Like, Emily, what got you started in like writing and activism?
So I've always been interested in combating paternalism. So that's abuses that are carried out for people's own good, or kind of said to be carried out for people's own good. In college, I started out in the fat acceptance movement. So fighting against sizeism and different types of oppression that occur against fat people or people of size. I conducted an honors thesis on the topic of weight-based bullying. So bullying that happens because of people's weight or size, which is definitely a form of paternalism, kind of bullying that's said to happen for their own health. If we fat shame people enough, then they'll lose weight is kind of the idea. So really exploring attitudes around that and ways to change those attitudes. And then I actually was involuntarily committed the night before my college graduation. And so I started getting really interested in psychiatric paternalism and ways that paternalism is carried out kind of through psychiatry, through the mental health system, different abuses, deprivations of liberty based on people's health or in the name of people's mental health. So that's kind of been the angle, and I've been trying to fight different forms of paternalism in different ways.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So I guess so I don't know exactly where we should go next. I guess we could go into so what are you doing? I guess we could go into what you're doing right now, and try to, I guess, and also following after you elaborate on that, what are, like, if someone who doesn't know a lot about this, what's your, because if someone approaches you and says like something like, I don't know, like, well, it is for their own good, so why shouldn't we just do it if they're mentally ill? Someone who doesn't know a lot of the topic, what's your approach to that? Because I'm pretty sure, because the best way to approach these kinds of things is where we just assume, like, everyone's ignorant, including us. So how would you educate someone normally who doesn't know a lot about the subject?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good starting place, is kind of this idea that anyone can decide what is for someone else's own good. That, I think, is the number one assumption that I'm trying to challenge, this idea that I can decide that I know what's best for you or anyone else. I tend to think that each person is the expert of themselves, or at least no one else is the expert of another person. So each person kind of has to have the final judgment, the final say on decisions regarding their own mind and their own body. And so really that's the principle of my activism. That's kind of what Mad Pride is all about. I think that's what I like to call my position, cognitive liberty. So that's what cognitive liberty is really all about. It's about fighting the assumption that I or anyone else can know what's best for someone.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, like to someone that really is, in your mind, like, delusional and truly doesn't, like, if someone is having a complete mental breakdown, would you still have them be able to...
defining that? Let's just try to be, I guess, good scientists about it. Like,
yeah.
What do you...
Complete mental breakdown. Like,
it's trying to define it, so because we need to be good
all
scientists.
right. Here's like an extreme, like someone who is suicidal.
Okay.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so my position is pretty pro right to suicide.
Same here. I mean, I think if you want to end your life, it's perfectly fine. I feel like what Dylan and I are also, well, because I myself on Dylan there are asking is like if someone is I guess it's like a complete change in character overnight, and it's to the point where you think it'd be abnormal, and I guess a mental breakdown where it's not like their character at all to act like that. If someone has actually like like I don't want to be on this earth anymore. Totally, I think they're right. Why should we force them to? That's ridiculous. And I guess it's just if it's totally out of character and you just I don't like to use the word feel, but if you really I still use the word think. If you really think like they're not acting the way they are and they're acting completely out of character, and you think that they're going to, I don't want to say regret it because you can't regret it, but you almost feel like they don't have control over their own actions in a matter of fact. So what would you, so I don't know if, I don't know if I'm completely ignorant. I'm wrong about if that's even an actual thing. I guess I'm just asking that.
Yeah. So that's usually the argument, right? With suicide, especially with psychosis, it's very much, well, this person doesn't have control over their actions, or this is out of character, kind of like no one in their right mind would ever want to commit.
Yes, general assumption, right.
So, my position tends to be like no one can really decide for anyone else what's out of character for them, what's not. I think if on a human to human level, if I had a close friend who I really like had known for several years and I was like, hey, like, I don't really think this person is like, I don't think this is maybe what they want. And I'm coming at this from a place of like knowing them in a human relationship. Then, of course, I would do everything in my power to make sure that they can make an informed decision, have informed consent over it. And if that involves, just trying to buy some more time, then that makes sense. But on a state level, in terms of using state force, I think that's where it gets complicated, and it can just be a very slippery slope if you set a precedent where the state can come in and use force if they decide you're acting out of character or you're not in control of your actions. How is it okay for the state to decide that about someone? When is it okay to use physical force? That can lead to a really dangerous path. Like for me, this happened to me, this has happened to a lot of people I know in the activist community. And we feel that we're acting rationally or that we're acting in ways that we want to act that is in our own best interest, and someone else comes along and says, no, you're clearly sick because you're acting this way, like you're going to regret this later. And for someone else to make that judgment and then use physical force and put physical force behind it is pretty problematic and dangerous.
Yeah. So I guess then it say like, so where do you, so where would you, because you were saying that, so obviously you draw the line, because I'm wondering, I guess exactly.
Here, I have a good question. Is there any line to be drawn when someone's rights should be taken away?
Because clearly physically someone is crossing the line, but where is the line drawn? Because you were saying that you support, talking to that person, and so I guess where's the line?
Is it someone who wants to inflict physical harm on others? Like where
I think if someone wants to inflict physical harm on others, I'm pretty pro detention or restraint in that case, force. I think
regardless if they're the mainstream mentally ill, whatever the mainstream community defines that as, you would obviously, no matter what, want to restrain someone who's physically violent and going to hurt someone.
I would. I generally think, though, that physical violence comes from a place of powerlessness, and there's a lot of systemic issues that lead to physical violence. And so I'm really interested in exploring alternative solutions, exploring kind of what the situation is and how we might be able to change their context, change the situation, rather than resorting to violence or confinement or something that's just purely punitive. So I really hesitate even in circumstances of physical violence. But obviously, if someone's about to die, if someone's about to, be attacked in a way that's going to result in bodily harm, then, at that point, you do whatever you can in the immediate situation to protect people.
Definitely. That's really interesting. I haven't met too many people that are like advocating for, which I think is really interesting that not more people are advocating for, because it seems like such an obvious thing to like have the right to like to not want to be restrained.
Yeah.
I think that's I think it's like really interesting that like not more people are out there just talking about it, that it's just like so accepted among like, you know, people around us that it's like, oh, they're just the crazy people, who cares?
Yeah, I think one issue with like mental health and this kind of activism is that there are so many assumptions in place that society just takes for granted as like, this is fact, that get to the level where we're forcibly confining people who aren't harming anyone else, who are making decisions about their own minds and bodies. And so it's like a lot of deconstructing assumptions and a lot of just kind of challenging people's thinking, and it's really uncommon to find people who are receptive or willing to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too how like somehow our society hasn't accepted yet that mental health isn't like, I know this is a common thing, but it isn't just like any other disease. I think almost because it's not like a scientific thing that you can go on an X-ray and point out like, oh, here's the problem. It's like something that you have to describe, and it's like I know because I've struggled a lot with anxiety, and that's why I left school. It's from really bad anxiety and panic attacks, and a few family members. But I think it's so interesting how people haven't accepted it yet, that it's just like any other disease, and people don't really have a choice over it.
Yeah, although I think the idea that it's just like any other disease, it's complicated, and
because I think it's not exactly a disease either, right? Am I correct? And it's not like, it's just, I mean, why can't it be something different rather than just like it's a problem? Like just because it's, I mean, I don't know if I'm describing that properly or not.
I think so. I mean, it's one of those questions about where do you start with challenging the assumptions?
Right.
So I think that on one hand, we have this assumption that illness is always bad, that disease is always bad, and that people with different illnesses and diseases in general, physical or mental, whatever, always need to be cured, that they always cause suffering, or that suffering always needs to be cured. And I think it's really important to challenge that. I think there's people with both, mental illnesses and physical illnesses that don't necessarily want to be cured. I think with mental illness, especially, there's a whole lot of people challenging the notion of mental illness itself and saying a lot of the states and traits that we consider mental illness maybe aren't pathological, or they're natural reactions to the environment, to different systemic factors, and to call them an illness can be invalidating. So, for me, I know that I feel suicidal pretty constantly in response to like just how oppressive and terrible our society is. And so to call that an illness as if it originates within myself is like invalidating kind of the influence of oppression. But yeah, so I think it's really complicated. The idea that it's a disease like any other can perpetuate this idea that it's like the individual's responsibility to cure it or to do something about it. But I also think that in general we need to challenge the idea that all illnesses, whether they're physical or mental, necessarily need to be cured, or that it's somebody's personal responsibility. And I absolutely think, physical illnesses can be influenced by the environment as well, by someone's context, by oppression. So I think just our assumptions around illness and disability both need to be challenged.
I do have one, if you could, all right, it's like just a theoretical question. If you could change the public's perspective on one thing about mental illness, what do you think that would be?
This is hard. I only get one.
I mean, you can do as many as you want.
Okay. I would say I would like to change the public's perspective on all illness and disability, I think. And I would say the most important thing would be to stop with the victim blaming, stop with blaming the individual for needing to change it in some way, or needing to cure it or get rid of it. Whether that's through medication or going to a hospital or a lot of people think that if you just exercise enough or do enough yoga, then you can get rid of your depression, anxiety, or whatever physical illness it might be. And I think I would also want the public to see the value in illness and disability, and not in a way that dismisses the pain and suffering that they come with, but just in a way that that embraces diversity and sees it as along the spectrum of human diversity. I think especially with a lot of madness, there's a lot of like madness as rebellion, madness as something that's, you know, people are responding to systemic factors, systemic oppression. And they might feel depressed because of that, or go psychotic because of that, or whatever it is. And there's value in that people are responding. They're not just continuing to perpetuate the same system and just going along with it, but they're showing outward reactions to it and drawing our attention to what's wrong. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
I do have all right, so you were talking a good bit about like fat shaming, and you were part of that community, or anti-fat shaming, I should say. But like, do you think there's a correct way to talk to someone who you think is eating like incredibly unhealthy? Because I know multiple people who just like
genuinely care about them, and you want
who just take really bad care of themselves, and all they do, like I personally, I know these people, and I don't know if there's a correct way, or if you don't say it at all.
I guess I would
like you just ask them if they're okay, because it seems like this is not all the time, but a lot of people who are having like problems with eating and being overweight, it's like more than just wanting to eat unhealthy. It's like something in their own personal life that is
like, I know a lot of eating disorders come from like actual emotional problems and actually challenge. I know that, and like you were saying earlier, like directly confronting someone and saying you're eating unhealthy and you're a fat slob, I mean, that makes things a lot worse, because you're completely
not helping anything.
You're completely devaluing them as a person. I think what I was trying to ask though is not obviously not that, is like, is there a way to, like, for someone you genuinely care about anything and you see them like eating to the point of and eating very unhealthy, and you genuinely care about them, and you don't want them to get really sick. So, you know, how would you approach, you know, talking to someone?
I mean, first of all, I would say, do you really think anything that you're about to say is new information to them? Like, most people know what foods are like generally considered healthy and not. And so
I don't think he's trying to say like, oh, did you know you're eating unhealthy? Because it's very pretentious, and clearly, clearly they're not. No one's stupid. No one's really that stupid. I think he's trying to like if you see someone doing something that's clearly bad, even not bad. Okay, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't sound so. I don't even know the word that I'm trying to say.
Paternalistic.
What?
Paternalistic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in that kind of way. I'm trying to word it in a way that's more supportive instead of like overbearing.
Like, what would you do if you saw someone that was like doing something so bad that it would like injure themselves?
I think I would question my definition of injury. Like, why do I get to decide if they're making a decision for themselves? Why do I get to decide that I like know better than them? Like, why can't I look at maybe they're doing that for a good reason? You know, everybody's heard that vegetables and fruits are healthy, you know, carbs are not, or whatever, you know, everybody's heard some version of what's healthy and what's not. And so if they're choosing that, I would maybe try to assume that everybody's doing things generally for like good reasons. People have their reasons. People know what's best for themselves a lot of times, or they're balancing different needs for different things. And so I might ask, you know, so for example, if someone is eating a lot or whatever, eating quote unquote unhealthy because they have some emotional need, then I might say, oh, it sounds like they've found a way to like, you know, fit their emotional needs that is working out for them right now. So why do I feel the need to go and question that? Why do I feel the need to go like intervene, you know?
Well, I guess I feel like if you would really like, you know, feel that way, and they're doing that to fill an emotional need. I mean, you see a lot of times, because a lot of times you see eating disorders are mostly, like you were saying, filling in an emotional need. I know that you forget obesity or anorexia or any extreme like that. I'm talking about like just unhealthy, forgiving unhealthy eating habits, unhealthy habits in general. Like when I define unhealthy, I'm defining like harmful towards the body, like stem from a lot of times. And I'm not saying none of them are personal choice, because you can't just say, well, I'm only here for so long. I just want to, have fun. And that's totally fine. I totally respect that. And I guess it's so hard to word what I'm trying to say. Like if I see, because I guess it's different when you talk. I feel like it's different when you're thinking about it in your own, like, well, it could be working for them. If I see Dylan like physically harming himself, like let's take it up another notch. If Dylan is, cutting himself because he and I really just, as his friend, I genuinely don't want to see him, hurt himself or hit the wrong vein and kill himself. And now, yeah, that is his personal choice. And I'm never going to actually force him to stop. I'm never going to physically hold him down. Mm-hmm. But, I want to, because clearly he hasn't always been like this. And I'm wondering if there's something else going on and we can fix that problem instead of doing, because I see also I guess I'm not going to say that part because that part's irrelevant. So yeah, is there any way that I could, just talk to him as like an actual, I mean, obviously I can, but how would you even, like, how would you word that? And would you even,
would you even talk to someone who's like
hurting themselves or cutting themselves?
I mean, I will just say, so like for me, I cut myself, I harm myself. And for me, it's really helpful. Like, I don't even like calling it self-harm because for me, I get very like overwhelmed and like intensely depressed over the state of the world and over like all of the systems of oppression that impacts me. And so one way that I use to like cope with that or react to that is cutting and what's called self-harm, self-injury. And so, I've had people ask me about it and just, is everything okay or whatever? And usually I just respond by saying, yeah, this is something that helps me. It's something that I do to like cope with things. And I think if that answer were like respected, if it's just like a conversation where, two friends are kind of just talking about like what they do to cope. And like if someone is coping, if one of them is saying like, no, this is what I find helpful to cope. I eat a ton or I cut myself or whatever I do. Then I think, yeah, as long as it's respected, that can be a conversation. I think another thing is like, we focus so much on like the outward behaviors and outward expressions of pain, and we don't focus at all hardly on like internal pain, like what someone is feeling. And we assume that if we can just stop someone from committing suicide or if we can just stop someone from cutting themselves, then we've done something good. But then we haven't like resolved their emotional pain. We haven't resolved like what's causing them to feel that way. And so I think
what I was trying to say is like, is there any way, I mean, is there a healthy way to approach trying to resolve the court issue?
Yeah, I think sometimes if people like don't even focus on the cutting, if they're just like, oh, like, are you in pain? Like, is there anything I can do if they ask? And like, a lot of times it's like, no, there's nothing you can do. Like the world is what it is. And so I'm just going to like cope however I know how. And sometimes that's the answer, but yeah, but sometimes there's things you can do and like people will respond. So I think it's all about just like having a conversation where you're respecting someone's autonomy and not, I think it's all about like not saying that anything is inherently harmful or anything is inherently unhealthy, because for one person it might actually be really healthy and it might be like reducing their pain, reducing their emotional pain, helping them cope. And for another person, it might be, something really negative that they would like help with, or someone might just like really enjoy the experience of cutting. I don't know. I have friends who just like enjoy it. But if I offered to purchase like clean razor blades or something, or do you want any help finding techniques that are like not lethal, they might respond well to that and be like, oh, sure, that sounds good. So it's all about kind of respect and just meeting the other person where they're at, I think.
That's interesting because I've never actually heard. That's the first time I've never actually heard a perspective like that, and it's almost like, because we were talking about before the show started, Dylan and I and Jim were talking about how libertarianism, and Dylan and I, we don't think any drugs should be illegal. If you want to take the drugs, I think taking heroin is a very harmful thing and it's a very damaging thing for your body. But if you want to do that and you're like, hey, I only live once and I just really like heroin. All right, sure. I mean, so yeah, I think
I also thought it was really interesting. I listened to this theory. It was Gad Sad. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's like an evolutionary biologist, and he's a professor at some school. I don't know, but he's very, very, very interesting. And he was on this podcast I like to listen to quite a bit, and he was talking about how every single mammal has this way of coping, like just a natural way of a natural abortion. And it's like if the water isn't clean, there's just not enough resources to support a child, the body will just automatically shut off any capability of having a child. And first of all, I just think that's really insane that the body is capable of doing that. Just how smart it is, like to understand the surroundings and unconsciously just do it. But he has this theory that humans' way, because people haven't observed this in humans, that the way humans cope with it, because we don't really have to deal with the struggles, or most people don't have to deal with the struggles of not having clean, the majority of people who live in America do not have to deal with the problems of not having clean water or enough food.
The majority.
Yeah. So he was saying that our new way is like if you have a bad environment, you go into having like an eating disorder, and that an eating disorder is our way of stopping there being any baby being born, most likely because there's like a bad surroundings for the child, like either a bad influence, a bad, I don't know, boyfriend, a bad father. It could that's just how the body, that's the human's way of aborting a baby, which I thought was so fascinating.
Interesting.
And just how almost everything that happens to us and everything we think, and probably even mental illness, some way tracked back to evolution, and that there's some reason that it happens.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll look that up. Yeah, what were you saying though?
Yeah, I think so. I hesitate with a lot of evolutionary explanations, because I think evolutionary biology and psychology can absolutely be used in really oppressive ways. But
yeah, definitely.
And I think this idea that procreation is somehow the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it ties in with a lot of oppression against people labeled mentally ill, and and oppression against disabled and ill people in general. And so I think that's something that needs to be looked at. But yeah, in so much as serve a purpose or serve a need in society, a social function, I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Wait, so you said, it's the fat idea that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, this whole idea that, the purpose of us is to, continue to procreate, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that, so how is that, I guess I would say oppressive? I understand,
so
how would it be?
A lot of disability and illness is defined as that which interferes with procreation, or that which makes it less likely for someone to procreate. That's definitely why, queer people have been marginalized for most of history, continue to be. This idea that our function is to procreate is just, is very harmful, leads to marginalization of people who are less likely to do that. And also a
more evolved, species, I don't think we need to hang on to such, I guess, outdated.
And I think it's really interesting too that the theory about procreation is the only reason for life is, I was listening to a TED talk, and it was very interesting because homosexuality is incredibly common in almost every species on Earth.
It's dogs, the animal. It's very common.
It's not an odd thing.
It's not unnatural, as people like to tout. It's actually extremely natural because it's in a lot of different species. Humans are not these special species who just happen. No, this happens. This is a natural thing. And even if it was a natural thing, why would it be bad? And
I thought it was interesting too, this guy's theory on homosexuality, because he was talking about his son being homosexual, and not in a bad way, he doesn't. But he was saying that there's some theory that it's like to take care of other children, which I thought was very interesting.
I like that.
That like the reasoning have gay like that there's homosexuality in the animal. Yeah, like the evolutionary reason for having homosexuality is to take care of the children, because he was talking about how like his son, who's the oldest out of like all his siblings by a lot, by like a large margin, like just has like an aura around him that the other kids just like love him, like have a really like deep connection with him, and he had some science behind it. But I thought that was a really interesting theory, because it's one thing that like evolutionary scientists can't deny, that there's just naturally homosexuality in every single part of the animal kingdom, and there has to be some reasoning for it. It's not like just shows up for no reason.
Yeah.
Important.
I think that's a really good point. But I also, so I don't know if you guys have heard of antinatalism. So that's the philosophy that it's like morally wrong to procreate. I don't know if I'd personally go that far. I certainly like wouldn't apply that theory to like friends or family members who are having kids or whatever.
Neil definitely has that idea a lot of the time.
Oh, really? Okay.
I definitely have had a lot of conversations dealing about how I just think like if we have this many people on planet Earth, it's like I wouldn't say it's completely immoral. I just would say, because and it's also, I've changed my opinion slightly only because of the fact that of the theory that's pretty much, I think it's pretty much been proven that human population will peak and it then will start to go down. So I'm like, okay, well then I guess it's all right. But the other part of me saying, well, there's still so many other children who could have, home, and as well as the fact, not to mention that just because it is going to peak at that point, then it's going to go down. That doesn't mean the way to that peak is going to be pretty bad. So,
yeah, I think the like philosophical argument is more that like existence is inherently harmful, or existence inherently comes with like a lot of pain and suffering. So why would you force someone into that who can't consent?
Yeah, I'm not that way, because I feel like I think that you definitely, I feel like you, because honestly, it's because if they really just hate existence afterwards, why they could kill themselves. So, and that would be after a while of existing. But the other thing is, I think the most people on planet Earth, now I am assuming here, like to exist. I think that's why we have a stable population of 7 billion people. I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong there, but I don't know if the 7 billion people would, and we would have, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if we have 7 billion people, I'm not saying all of them live happy lives, because that's just from the case it could be. I mean, I don't know. I feel like you want to interject here.
I feel like people like to procreate and they're afraid of death. I know that's really cynical. So
I think it's true.
They're afraid of death.
Yeah, I think like I know for me. So I feel like I'm like being super radical, and I don't know if you can edit this, but
It's
yeah,
it's all live.
well, whatever. I mean, so like for me, and I know a lot of activists who would take this position that like I'm pretty suicidal. I'm not like in love with existence, but like death is like absolutely terrifying. Like as humans are like, it's almost like survival, like biologically we are afraid of death. And so I don't know how many people actually, I'd love to like see a study where people like could actually speak freely on this. I think people can't really speak freely is the other thing, but I don't know how many people actually like really love existence or like are grateful to exist. I think there's a lot of oppressive conditions that make that very difficult.
I know it's very interesting. I don't know where I heard this the first time, but it's almost like you don't consent to being born.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so should you like procreate at all, because you're basically forcing this person to be alive.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Do you want to force them to do that at all?
And you're forcing them into the demands of society as well, into the demands of into the demands of living up to all the standards that, increase your likelihood of procreation. Into, like the capitalist, like ableist standards, being able-bodied, being attractive, being healthy. Like you're forcing someone to like conform to that or be super marginalized. So like, I think it's
I think society is just kind of crazy.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I do. All right, actually, Neil, I do have one question. So for like a very long time, I really liked listening and watching Anthony Bourdain because I really loved cooking. Very much into cooking, and it was a surprise when he killed himself, or at least for me. And all right, so there's like two sides of my brain that want to think like on one hand, because a lot of his show, he talks an incredible amount about his daughter, his young daughter. So on one hand, it's like that's going to really hurt her for a long time, but I don't know how else to think about it. Like, I know he did it for some reasoning. Like, his brain thought about it in some, like, rationalized it in some way. Like, to me, like, this is probably very, like, closed-minded, but it's like, that's a pretty hard thing to do to someone. Like, to his daughter, is, like, to totally take himself out of her life. Like, harsh. Like, I don't know if there's some other way to think about it. I
think there is. Yeah. I tend to think people
and I'm open-minded to one.
I tend to think people don't choose suicide. Or if they do, it's like, no, death is scary, right? Like, I'm really terrified of death. Like, it's not something that I would like actively be like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it. Like, it's really scary.
I think a lot more people would die. A lot more people would kill themselves.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do, but I don't think it's like a choice that people are like making in the sense of, I'm going to choose to get ice cream later today. I think it's like something that people are driven to do. And so I tend to look at whatever systemic factors are driving people to commit suicide, and those tend to be, those need to be held responsible. I get really frustrated by how much we hold suicidal individuals responsible for doing whatever they thought like was the only way to cope with their unbearable emotional pain, instead of like holding responsible what's driving that emotional pain. The way I look at suicide, I like to use a burning building metaphor. It's originally from David Foster Wallace. He says that being suicidal is basically like being in a burning building and wanting to jump out. Because you'd rather jump than suffer the painful, awful death of the flames consuming you. And so why would we ever blame the person who chooses to jump out rather than the fire, or whoever set the building on fire, the systems that, that are contributing to the fire that is society right now? So,
well, I guess I would, I like to always try to play devil's advocate, but I mean, could one not I'm not saying that, I'm just curious to see. So could one not argue that it would be, I guess, because there are so many interpretations to things. And is there any like legitimately, I guess, concrete way to hold quote, society responsible? I see a lot of people say society, but I mean, I don't really see because people like to make, I'm not saying it's bad to make blanket statements, but I'm saying people do like to make blanket statements saying society is A, B, C. And and I think that, I guess it's like, could it not be, I don't want to say it's all interpretation because it's not. And there are obviously different sides to every story, and sides that are not just interpretation, are actually factually been something, something has done to harm you in a mental or physical way. And I guess I would say people are so to blame society. Could it not just be, to at least some extent, people, interpreting different things in some way because something bad happens to you, and in the immediate, if something bad were to happen to someone, and if they were to immediately say that they would, and I'm not saying, I'm trying to word some way. I'm not saying it's bad to say this. I'm just saying people that do say that, is there any way to see, like, is it just like an interpretation or an experience, or is it an actual systemic thing that's happening? And is it always a systemic thing that's happening? or is there any way to find out? And should we always be so quick to, I guess, go and blame the society we live in?
Yeah, I think for me, I know that like you asked, how do we hold society responsible? I hold society responsible by holding myself responsible. I think that I contribute every day. What?
You hold society responsible by holding yourself responsible.
I'm complicit in all of the societal oppression, all of the systemic issues that I've talked about. Like, I'm absolutely complicit in that. I contribute to driving people to suicide. And I try to hold myself responsible for that. We can't, I think we're kind of conditioned and coerced by the economic and social system we live in to like be complicit with all of this. But we can like look for ways that we can challenge ourselves, I think, to be less complicit and to kind of break out of that complicitness every day. So for example, like fat phobia that I was talking about, I think we have an incredibly fat phobic society, and I have a lot of internalized fat phobia because we're pretty like conditioned, right? The media sends us lots of messages about how being fat is super unhealthy and super terrible and gross and disgusting, and we just are. We're all like really fat phobic, socialized to be fat phobic. And so I'm complicit in that. I'm complicit in like perpetuating fat phobia and making life really shitty for people of size, but also other, everyone suffers from fat phobia, and that we're all afraid of getting fat. We're all afraid of being fat. We all distance ourselves from fat people. And so I try and just like examine how I do that in my life and try and stop myself. I also try and speak out about it as much as possible. So
let me just try to clarify here. You say that you are how exactly are you contributing? You're contributing through just what? I mean, I just want you to like, I know you already said it. I just want to like very like, so how exactly? I just want to get it, ingrained in my head what you.
Yeah. So I have thin privilege and I benefit from thin privilege. I'm treated better in the healthcare system. I'm treated like so much better. I'm treated better in the school. I have been treated better in the school system. I'm treated better just by like friends, by colleagues. So that's kind of an example. I guess, it's not.
I guess how would that be your fault? I mean,
I guess because I'm like, so then I guess something more concrete that would be my fault is that I then like perpetuate that because that's what's been ingrained into me. I notice myself taking what thin people say more seriously than what fat people say. I notice myself if I'm trying to hire someone or find someone to mentor or whatever, just deciding whose voice to have in the room. I like unconsciously kind of gravitate more toward thin people. I'm more attracted to thin people romantically.
I don't think that's an oppressive thing. I think that's just a preference thing.
No, it's an oppressive thing.
You can't control I don't think you can control who you're, isn't that the whole premise of we shouldn't be anti-gay because even if they could control it, there's no point in doing that either. But
I guess I would just say like, I think our preferences are influenced by who has power in society. Most of us are attracted to power in some way or another. And so then people very much are shown like in the media and like positions of power and are given voice and are given credibility. We trust them more. Fat people are not. We see them as lazy or disgusting or incompetent. We make I make little assumptions about them, like about, right. I'll find myself asking, why are they that way? Or, things like that makes me complicit in oppression. Well, and I think we all are.
Sure. So do you think that humans are born with like a certain preference to thin people?
Sexual preference.
Yeah, sexual preference.
No.
Do you think there's any way to like change it? Because I know for myself, like I wouldn't be like I'm a cis straight man, so I like wouldn't like for myself I wouldn't be attracted to like this is like an extreme, but like a 500-pound woman that just wouldn't be attracted. Like sorry to say it like that, but it just wouldn't be attractive to me. Like I don't know if I really don't know if I could do anything to change that.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any way you can change it. I don't really think it has to do with how you're born, though. I think years and years of conditioning lead to being conditioned. And, I don't know, but I've been struggling with that about myself, all the time. And so what I try to do, I try to hold myself responsible. I try to speak out about fat phobia. I try to make sure I have fat people's voices when I'm hosting an event or putting something on. I try and ask fat writers to write for our magazine. I try to, just speak out about it, speak out about the need to center fat voices constantly. And really that's the only way I know how, but I do think holding myself responsible for all of the factors that drive people to suicide, I think that it makes me a better activist, and I think it would make the world a better place if we all kind of held ourselves responsible more often.
That's really interesting.
So would I mean,
that's something that really interests me, that point of view. I've never heard anything like that, because at least in my world, it seems like this is how I explain it to myself, is that just naturally women that aren't like excessively heavy, like 500 pounds, just throughout the course of history, those women have not been able. Now, I understand that the reason of life is not to procreate, and that's like, I understand how that could be oppressive, but like, just like my natural senses of wanting to procreate, because that just is a natural sense, is that
sexual preference is obviously a byproduct of wanting to procreate, because I mean,
I don't think that procreation has to be the whole goal of life, but I think it can be part of it.
Okay. I mean,
like I think it just can be. I'm not saying it has to.
I feel like it doesn't have to be part of. I feel like it should just be, because I think we're at a point of species where we can choose if we need to do that or not. And I don't think we need to procreate at this point in time.
Yeah, we have 7 billion.
I'm not saying
so then why should it be correlated with who we oppress or who we don't, who we find valuable and who we don't?
No, well, I'm not saying that you can't find someone valuable. I just think that, I mean, maybe there's the appeal of nature.
Finding someone, because I certainly enjoy the presence of many people who I'm not attracted to. Dylan, I enjoy Dylan's company. I'm not sexually attracted to him in any way, and I wouldn't call myself oppressive because I'm not sexually attracted to Dylan. Man, this is such a weird conversation right now. But I guess that would be like, I would definitely. I mean, I enjoy talking to Dylan. I enjoy talking to many people that I am not sexually attracted to, and I think sexual attraction is a different thing.
That was one example. I mean, I personally think that who we're sexually attracted to in terms of like beauty standards, that is influenced by cultural oppression. But I'm not saying that's like the main form of oppression that fat people experience. The main form of oppression is probably healthcare oppression, that they're discriminated against in healthcare settings. Also hiring, workplace oppression, definitely education. I think that though, like, people that we find unattractive are generally oppressed in all of those ways, and so it definitely do with attractiveness.
I think that when it comes to hiring, someone who is physically attractive to the person who is hiring them is definitely more likely to,
I know this is something I don't really like about myself, but it's just something that I just think naturally, and probably it is just because of like cultural influence. But it's like, if I see a fat person, I just think instantly, like I suppress it instantly, but like my natural instinct is to think like, oh, this person doesn't know how to take care of themselves. How could they take care of anything?
Yeah, because we've been ingrained with that message. We've, like, in the media, whenever you see fat people, they're almost always like eating constantly or like sitting on the couch. We don't see them as the CEO. We don't see them in like doing like awesome badass things. We don't we very rarely see fat people as likable characters. And so that's a big part of it. That's a cultural message that our parents usually ingrain us with to some extent. So this is like very like widespread cultural. It's not something that like we each are individually coming to. It's just like racism, right? Like Black people in the media are very much coded as like dangerous or violent. And so a lot of people get maybe more scared if they're like in a Black neighborhood or something, or they automatically assume that it's like unsafe. So it's just like any other bias where it's really ingrained into us. From
do you know why they're like how this all started? The oppression of fat people and through the media and the culture?
No, I think the same as a lot of other forms of oppression where historically certain groups just have like less power, and so it creates like a cycle of oppression that because a group has less power, they're then like almost blamed for having less power. For example, yeah, like Black people, for example, have like less economic opportunities and might have less like education opportunities, and then they're like blamed for like being less educated, and that like perpetuates stereotypes, and it's like this huge cycle. And I think it's the same with fat people, that they're like disempowered and discriminated against, and then they're told that like, oh look, you're not fully participating in society, look what that says about you, rather than look what that says about society.
So I have another question about something that you said. It's so you said in the healthcare industry. So how that's literally just my question. So how are they oppressed? How do you think that people are oppressed in health?
So one thing is they're given less pain medication. Their pain isn't taken as seriously. They're given way less like trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive care. They're assumed to kind of be like to not need as much like precaution taken. They're usually told to lose weight every time they come in, maybe shamed. Any health issue that they have is generally attributed to their weight. They might be denied different surgeries or medications.
Well, don't you think that being denied a surgery might be, because I know that there are some surgeries like where like a gastro, it's called a gastro bypass. I don't know what it is. And I know that performing that surgery with too much weight it gets too hard to get towards the stomach. And I think you can cut another organ and like cause organ failure. I mean, I don't know if I feel like something as systematic as like the pain killing thing that I can totally understand. It's like, you're just, it's basically just lose weight and then the pain will be fine, or something like that. And I guess another thing that I would ask, I'm trying not to, I just want to be clear here. I'm not trying to like counter everything you're saying. I'm just trying to elaborate on it. I'm not trying to like, let me just try to counter that right there. I'm just trying to.
But I am finding it really interesting, though, that like you almost don't want to believe that there's systemic oppression against fat people. And I'm curious about why. Like, I feel like if I were talking about systemic oppression against queer people or Black people or women or I think even mentally ill, you were like on board with that. But why is it that you are like incredulous?
Well, I wouldn't. I think it's because I think that where I draw the line is because I definitely, the employing thing, 100% totally agree, no doubt about it. Because it's just, well, I won't go. We already talked about that. I totally 100% agree. The pain killing thing, I can totally understand that. When it comes to like, because when you were saying, I think it's because I draw the line where it's like something like a systematic, because you go to a healthcare professional to get provided healthcare, and I was wondering now it's like when you say when something said like they're told to lose weight every time they come in, it's like, well, I mean, it's like, isn't that kind of like, if the healthcare professionals if you're going there for the healthcare professional and they're just, telling you what would be the healthiest thing to do. Obviously, you don't do the healthiest thing to do. I certainly don't do the healthiest thing to do every time.
Losing weight isn't necessarily the healthiest thing to do. There's plenty of scientific studies showing that weight is not necessarily correlated with health. Some people are not.
I mean, to like what extent was it like obviously losing weight when you're to the point of like, being malnourished is, not a good thing. But
no, they're saying not necessarily. Like, there's a lot of like fat people who are not unhealthy in any way, who exercise, who eat really balanced diets.
Well, I guess you should use an example, like someone not like that, like who, like I'm sure.
Okay,
like,
but I'm saying it affects everyone.
No, but I'm saying that let's say you go to a healthcare professional and this doctor who is very knowledgeable, because I'm sure that there are people who are overweight and are perfectly healthy, and there are people who are overweight, and there are people who are skinny who are not healthy, and they tell these people, the healthcare professionals tell these people, this isn't just a like fatter people, like heavier people or skinnier people, just everyone combined. Like if a healthcare professional tells you to do X because you're being unhealthy in a certain factor, do you know what I mean?
But that's not, the healthcare system is like systemically biased against fat people. So I'm saying fat people will go in and without even considering their diet, their exercise, anything, the automatic assumption is that they need to lose weight. They are like systemically denied more surgeries. And this is not something that you agree or disagree with. This is something that studies show and that fat people will tell you if you ask them. This is about listening to marginalized communities, not about deciding what's healthy or what's factually correct. Like the marginalized community knows what they experience.
Okay. I think I want to touch on this, like because I think we've definitely been on this topic for a little while.
I do have a question. So, like, I know in your mind, like, and I agree that the world is pretty messed up. Like, in your mind, what would be your ideal society? Like, how would your ideal society run? If you even have an idea of how it would run.
I don't know about like government or politically or anything like that. I'm not a super like political or government oriented person, but in terms of cultural values, the cultural values would be about liberty and living your life as you want to live it over health or over conforming to some definition of normality. And it would just be about like valuing every person as they are instead of trying to change them or fix them in some way.
I think that's really interesting.
So yeah. I guess I would also ask, as basically an add to that question, I mean, how would you, I guess, fix the healthcare industry? Because, I mean, how would you fix the healthcare industry with doctors? Like, if I go, what would be the ideal, I guess, appointment with the doctor?
So I'm a prescription abolitionist. So I don't believe in the prescription system except for antibiotics. So I think the ideal healthcare system, would not include prescriptions. It would be non-authoritarian. It would be much more about doctors being consultants and advisors and presenting a variety of different options rather than deciding that this person needs X, Y, or Z. It would be more about like understanding the person's values and what they want out of their life. And out of their body and out of their mind, and just trying to understand that more and work with them to achieve their goals.
Yeah, I always find that so interesting. Like, so what are your, this is an interesting thing for me. Like, what do you think about having like complete freedom and also like complete freedom of speech? Like, do you think that like hate speech should be allowed or that it even exists?
I think it's so dependent on context. I'm against locking people up for almost anything. Besides, I guess, maybe rape and murder. But even those come from really systemic issues a lot of times. But I mean, I think in the workplace, like if someone's going into work or school or whatever, they should be able to be in an environment that's free of hate speech. So maybe if someone's like saying a lot of hate speech in those environments, they can be fired or kicked out or whatever, or maybe other measures that aren't so punitive.
But you don't think that like if you just in day-to-day society that you should be like that hate speech should be illegal?
No, I don't think, I mean, in terms of, I don't think you should be locked up for it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think most things should be illegal. Yeah. I don't really know a lot of people who support that position though. I think most people think that schools and workplaces should be free from it, or like if I'm a publisher, I don't have to publish it, but I don't really know many people who think that you should be like locked up if you say it.
I know, I've met a few. It's pretty sad.
What did you say, Dylan?
I've met a few.
Yeah, I met a few people, about who said you should be locked up.
I think be like the hate speech should be arrested. I just think that's crazy. Like, I just wanted to hear what your point of view was on that. I did think that you should think, especially because I know you was talking about not wanting people to be arrested.
Yeah, I also just I'm really curious about where hate speech comes from. I think I've gotten really interested in like the incel movement, which I guess has a lot of overlap with like
incel movement.
Involuntary celibate. It's like men who
I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like men who like blame women for like not having sex with them. But they're like,
I think that's pretty funny. What do you think about that?
I think it's coming from a place of validity. Like, I wonder if these men are suffering from lookism maybe, or fat phobia, or some systemic issue, or maybe even ableism. I wonder what percentage of them might be like autistic or disabled in some way, and
Mm.
instead of being given the tools to like address ableism or lookism, they're like turning it on a group of people, like they're turning it on another like marginalized group of people and using this like rhetoric. So I think sometimes hate speech is like comes from a place of like being denied the ability to look at your own pain through a systemic lens, and denied the ability to really address your own pain and address your own victimhood and own it. And so instead people like turn it on someone else. And so yeah, so I think like even hate speech, a lot of activists I think like look at it as like, oh, this person is saying hate speech and they're bad, and like I guess, but like also maybe we should look at why, and we should look at, is there anything we can like do to like help them, address their pain in a different way.
Mm. That is really interesting. I know I'm not the biggest fan, but I'm sure you know Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I enjoy some of the things he talks about, but not everything.
I don't really, yeah, because there was like a whole conspiracy about how he kind of like lied about some things, and I did not like that. I mean, but
But it was very interesting. I heard him talking a lot about the insoles,
Yeah.
involuntary celibates, and I think his view on that I think was pretty interesting. And he was just talking about not necessarily being like conformist, but like just how they're exactly what you were saying, that they're not really addressing their own problems in life. That like maybe they have their own issues that they haven't really dealt with, and instead of like thinking about that, they go out and they blame others for their own problems. And
Yeah.
I thought he was really interesting on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like, I think blaming others for your problems, blaming, like looking at systemic frameworks that allow problems to exist is generally a positive thing, not like blaming other individuals maybe, but like just like having like a systemic sociological analysis of it can be really positive. But I think that's the issue, yeah, is that like they don't have that. And so, yeah, they're like just blaming another group. But yeah, I generally really dislike Jordan Peterson. I think he's horrible. But
yeah, I know. I think he get a little crazy sometimes.
A lot of the time, yeah. Yeah, I think he refuses to call people by their right pronouns. That's what he like got famous for.
No, that's actually not true. He always calls people by the right pronouns. He doesn't like people being forced to call people by the right pronouns, but he always uses the right pronouns that people want.
Okay.
But he has gone on record saying that.
Okay.
There was a good period of time when I really did enjoy listening to him, and that was one of the biggest misunderstandings about him, was that he didn't use people's correct pronouns. But like he does use people's pronouns. The thing that he was advocating for was he didn't want people to be forced to use the right pronouns, to have complete speech.
And yeah, I believe in freedom of speech in any.
But like, he always uses the right pronouns of what people want, like what their pronouns would be.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
He was just advocating that people shouldn't be forced to call people by their correct pronouns.
Okay.
Or like be fined. Because he was saying that there was this law that forced people to be called by the right pronouns, otherwise they'd be fined. And that's what he was saying he was against. But
and that's the reason I don't
that's
like
the thing we didn't like him about.
He actually lied about that is the thing. And I just recently found that I told you about that, Dylan, right? He literally lied about that law, and that pissed me off so much. I was like, oh my God, he actually literally lied about that law. Because I was actually like, oh, Jordan Peterson, that's really cool. But no, he lied about Bill C-16, meaning the Canadian government had to come out saying, this is a lie. That's not what the bill says. All the Bill C-16 did is it integrated. See, Canada already had a right, basically saying like you can't oppress people because of A, B, C, D. It literally just added because of their gender orientation to that. That's all it did. The law. That's all they did. And Jordan Peterson said that they would fine people if you. That's not what the law said. The law said that it would. It's literally just adding them. In fact, It was already a law in every single province of Canada, but they just added to the federal law as like a symbolic thing. So it was already in the province that he was talking about it in. So it would have been a moot point. So this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, that when I found that out, I was so pissed off. I was like, oh my God, this lied to, I mean, I don't know if anyone can misinterpret that much. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's ridiculous. And the Canadian government had to come out saying, this was already a law. We're just symbolically making it a federal law. This is symbolic. This does nothing else. It literally, passing Bill C-16, the only one thing would have did is, oh wait, no, it wouldn't have done anything. It would have done nothing. Passing Bill C-16 would have done nothing because it was already a law in the local government of every single province. So it would do nothing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking just like generally, like I think there's a lot of focus on like freedom of speech that includes like a lot of like freedom of hate speech, which I guess is something to like think about. But it's interesting to me how like free speech advocates, I rarely see them advocate for like the freedom of like marginalized groups to have freedom of speech. Like especially the right to like if I go into an emergency room now and I say I'm suicidal, I'm going to get locked up. And that's just my identity. That's just like part of who I am. And so if I announce who I am in certain settings, I will get locked up. No free speech.
I thought it was very, I definitely, that's a very interesting point. I haven't heard much of that, but I haven't listened too much about him, so I don't know if he's done anything really creepy, but there's a guy, Dave Rubin.
I don't know him.
You don't know him? I don't know too much about him, so he might have said something crazy I don't know about.
I've listened to some of his stuff, like 5 minutes of it, but I've never actually sat down and listened.
But he did listen. I listened to one thing he said that I thought was really interesting, and he was talking about how freedom can be very messy. Like freedom isn't a very easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And like it's like
talk about that, yeah.
Freedom doesn't have to be concrete, and that's what makes it awesome. Is that it's not always the amazing. Sometimes it's really awesome. Like what makes it so awesome is that it's not always so awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like we have the freedom to be on this show and talk about all these things, but there's also the KKK also has the freedom to go out and just spew complete, BS, and that's ridiculous and that's horrible. But it's a byproduct of the freedom, and it sucks. But it's like it's kind of a trade-off. It's like the KKK is doing these horrible things as long as they're not physically harming anyone or damaging or stealing or anything that's directly harming them in any way. They're free to go out and, for lack of better words, spout their bullshit, and that's really, and they can do that just as we can, and
talk about how we disagree with the KKK.
What's that?
Yeah.
Talk about like. Just like they can talk about how much they hate us, we can talk about how much we hate the KKK. But like in a communist society, we couldn't talk. Or I mean, like a
Not
Russian communist. No, like the let's say a Soviet Union era, you couldn't talk about how you hate the Soviet Union.
What is anti-free speech? Doesn't necessarily have to be a socialist.
No, it doesn't. I meant to say like I was thinking of like Soviet Russia, and then I just thought communist, but it was the wrong.
That hurts. Yeah.
It was the wrong way of saying it.
I will just say though, like it does take privilege to be able to do this. Like I do think that there's a lot of people who, if they wanted to have their own like radio show or, go online and do this, like I think it would be a lot harder. I think there's a lot of like marginalized groups that like they might face like consequences with employment or with education if they were to do this. So I do think that like it's not so easy, and I'm excited that media is becoming more and more democratized, and the idea that like that people under 18 can like do this type of thing, so cool and exciting. But like I think there's a long way to go in terms of like truly democratizing media and truly like having not having a consequence-free kind of environment for being able to take controversial stances.
I think that is really cool that like people could start really saying what they want to say and have the platform to do it. I think that's so awesome about the internet and free speech is that people have the capability to speak their minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's why I love freedom so much. Like, especially coming from a Sudbury school and a free school, is like is the capability to be entirely and completely free and control of my thoughts and what I put into my mind.
Yeah, so could you guys tell me a bit about your school? I'm like super curious.
Yeah, for sure. So the way our school works is, so it's like the base idea. I forget. I don't know. There's some person that first wrote about it. I forget his name, but it's like the idea that you learn and memorize things much easier and faster if you enjoy doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
which is a very basic concept, but people can't seem to take that idea
People
and
don't
put
seem
it.
to wait. People don't understand that idea. I always try to explain it like this. I say because there was this these two parents that my dad was having an argument with, and he was basically saying how they were saying he can never concentrate on anything. They were talking about his son. The son, he can never concentrate on anything. He can never do this. All he does is he's playing his video games, or we're saying, come over here, do this, and we say something, and he doesn't even respond, and because he's so engrossed in it. And then my dad said, so he can't concentrate on anything, right? And he said, yeah. So what would you call that when he's doing the game and he's all doing that? Is he concentrating on that? And it's like, so yeah, if you're concentrating, and people seem to think, oh, well, kids will only concentrate on the things that are like, quote, unimportant. And I'm not saying that video games are even unimportant, because I don't think they are.
I agree.
I don't think anything we do is unimportant. I think depending on what you want to do or what you want to get out of life, that changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Dylan, you want to continue? Or do you?
Yeah, I mean, like, so another part of our free school is that it's completely run by the students and the staff.
It's a democratic school.
It's a democratic school, and that's the other aspect of it, besides just being able to learn whatever you want to learn, is like the chance to run the school.
Uh-huh.
You and your peers get to run the school and vote on all the rules you make. And
everyone's vote is equal. So each staff member's vote is equal to a student's vote. Everyone has an equal vote. So we decide what to do. We're going to decide our graduation process this year. I want to propose a motion that when school starts up again, I want to propose a motion on streamlining our process for committees, and our graduation process. Sudbury graduation is only the Sudbury student writes a thesis on how they thought what they learned in the school, what they learned, why they think they're ready to contribute to society, what they're gonna do, how they think they've progressed as a human being, that kind of stuff. Like, how do they think they've improved personally, or if at all, or basically who you become. And that basically, I keep saying basically a lot. And so you go in front of a committee that's assembled from your peers and staff members from other Sudbury schools, then the entire Sudbury community, this entire schooling community, which is like the parents and everyone, and they'd ask you questions about why what you learned or anything. And then the committee will vote, and then you get a diploma. So it's, and we're trying to flesh that out. And this is, people seem to think that you give the kids the power, they're going to motion to buy candy and with all the school money. And that seems like it's a legitimate argument I get sometimes. And it's like, well, the proof is we haven't done that yet. And because if we did, we'd know, well, the school would probably shut down the next day because all of our money's gone. And we decide how much the staff members are paid. We decide, it's literally, it's very, the 4-year-olds, if they're in the school meeting where we decide how much the staff members get paid, they do that. We can fire staff. We vote to hire them. The final say for everything goes to school meeting. Committees are delegated things, like delegated power, like judicial committee, and stuff like that. That's all delegated. We do delegate some things to like our staff member, Brian, things that it's very unnecessary for things to go to school meeting. Like things like handling the website. We have an IT committee that handles the website. And, I've edited the website a bit before. I've posted to the South Jersey Sudbury School official YouTube before, but we don't necessarily make Brian go through a school meeting to do that. And just because it's unnecessary.
What was your schooling like?
I went to like an elite boarding school type thing, and hated it.
What a surprise.
We kind of had the like democratic schooling thing too. Right. It wasn't quite democratic. I mean, I think the faculty made most of the decisions, but just like our judiciary system, I remember was fairly democratic. So if you got in trouble, you would go in front of like a board of like students that were voted on.
Staff members go in front of the judicial board as well if they.
Oh, interesting.
Did they? I'm asking.
No.
Yeah, that's how it works in South Summer School. I've written Brian up everything, and he said to go in front of the judicial committee, and the judicial committee can punish him or warn him or anything like that.
Interesting.
Members have to go in front of the judicial committee if they're written up, and anyone can write anybody up. I can write Dylan up. Dylan can write me up, and that just means you have to show up in the judicial committee the following day and handle the case.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah. I remember feeling though, so like I'm autistic. I like did not really fit in at all with my peers, and I was super outcasted in a lot of ways. And so I remember hating how much was voted on and how much I had to rely on my peers' opinions of me to like get by or to like survive. The teachers for the most part really liked me because I did so well academically. And so I kind of like relied on them and tried to like, you know, get favors with them in terms of, just surviving. Do you feel like there's that dynamic at all? Do you feel like there are people that are like ostracized? But do you say that there's anyone that no one likes and that it's kind of hard for them?
Oh, well, we haven't had, we haven't really had anyone particularly like that. The only people that ever happens to are people that are like really
violent.
Yeah, violent towards us are the only people that we kind of, like, I don't want to say make outcast, but like, it's like a normal
rap with them if it's always going to end with them attacking us. I mean, it's a very
and it's not like we don't try to talk to them. It's just like if you try to talk to them, they try and hit you. So it's like I don't want to talk to that person.
Yeah.
It's a very logical. It's a logical step. It's like I don't want to talk to you because you're going to hit me.
Yeah.
And also, it's not even that. It's like, and some people just don't like get along with other people just because that hasn't really happened that much in our school at all. I think currently with our student count, everyone gets along with each other well. Yeah, everyone kind of gets along with each other. But it's, if people are just not compatible, when they just do not share any opinions and they just really just don't want to like being around each other, or one party just doesn't enjoy the other person's company for whatever reason, then it's obviously, it's like in the real world. It's an individual's choice to, there's nothing systematic saying, like age. There's nothing like 9-year-olds can talk to 16-year-olds completely. I mean, the 9-year-old can write up a 16-year-old. The 4-year-old can write up a 19-year-old, like because the school goes up to 19. 4-year-old can write up a 19-year-old. 19-year-old have to appear in JC and make their case to say I didn't do this, or even say I did do it. And the rules are completely student decided as well.
Yeah, like we make all the rules. So I think that's another thing that's really interesting is like if you think that there's a rule that's unjust or unfair, you can go and try and change it if your argument is good enough, if your reasoning is good enough. Because most likely if your reasoning is good enough, you can change the other people's minds of why you think it's illogical. And then you can change the rule. And that's why like if you break one of our rules, which all their rules are very basic rules, and most of the time it's not like you get written up and nothing really happens. You get like a warning. Like that's a big thing that scares people is JC, is your judicial committee, that it's like a big scary thing, like going to the principal's office. But most of the time it's like no victim crime, like you didn't do your cleanup job, or you forgot to, you did it late. It's like, all right, you just get a warning, or you have to do an extra cleanup job. It's like nothing harsh at all. And that's like one of the biggest things people are afraid of is JC, but like it's a totally different story if you hit someone. Like then you're in trouble. Like then you go home, or you call your parent, or you're suspended or something like that.
Right.
And it's great too because it's not like you're being unfairly punished by the adults. It's like, it's your peers that are the ones punishing you and making these decisions. So I think it means a lot more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's like the way our school is run, it totally gets rid of the argument that's like, oh, this rule is just so stupid and I hate it. And why does it even exist? Like, well, go change it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a good excuse.
Yeah, just saying this school is, and it actually brings into the how you're talking about like what can we do, and if we think society is being unfair in this manner, what can we do about it? Well, you go to school meeting and you change it. In Sudbury's case, at least, you literally all it takes is writing it on the board that we have for the issues, and then you make your argument why this needs to change or add or be removed. And then if the majority thinks that your argument is sound, they will vote for that to happen.
And I think what's also great about our school is it's very, I like to use the term, like, we're a very common sense school. So, like, in regular society, you couldn't make a rule saying, oh, you can't say things that would hurt someone else's feelings.
Right.
Because that's so, you can interpret that in a billion different ways.
Yeah.
And people are going to be idiots.
But we don't have that being said, we don't have a rule actually saying you can't say something that hurts someone's feelings.
Yeah, but like you can't, like we have...
It's subjective. Anyone can, I mean, we have a rule saying you have to respect people. Like you cannot be disrespectful and you must respect their right to remain peaceably. And we also have a rule saying if you're disrespecting someone's right to remain peaceably, someone can invoke the stop rule, basically saying stop. If someone is like doing something to you, like talking to you, and you can invoke the stop rule, basically saying stop doing what you're doing to me. I mean, you can't like say if someone's like writing a note, stop rule, you can't do that. And if someone's doing something that annoys you, if someone's doing something that annoys you, but is being done not towards you or not even near you, you still can't say stop. It's only when it's being done directed towards you or it's directly affecting you in a reasonable way, of course.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. That sounds super interesting. And what's the size of it?
Right now we have like 20 kids.
Oh, okay. Wow. So it's small.
Yeah, we're pretty...
Oh my God, yeah, very small.
Okay.
It started the original students were, I can count them on my one hand. It was Dylan, it was me, Dylan, a kid named Julian, a kid named Ellie, and my sister. So it was 5 people that was when the school opened. The first day of school opened. Sudbury schools tend to be very small.
Yeah.
Especially because we're a private school, we're not funded at all. So we have to charge for tuition we're nonprofit.
Okay.
We charge for tuition. Like we pay our staff members, but we pay our staff members, but the problem is that we just can't we don't pay because Brian, our sole staff member and founder right now, he did found school, he founded, that's right?
Yeah, founded.
Yeah, okay. I was like, all right, what am I saying here? Yeah, he founded the school and but we don't actually pay him because we don't pay the board or anything. We pay him because he's a staff member. If he was no longer a staff member, but he was still, he still founded the school. He was still a founder. We wouldn't pay him. It's nonprofit. We only pay our staff members because they literally work there. And it's completely nonprofit. The only reason we pay tuition is so we can sustain ourselves. And if we got tax money, we'd be like, oh, no tuition, but we have to do tuition. And we have a very, very, I think, fair financial aid system. It's and the reason we had it because we don't have tuition saying we have to pay this or too bad. We have financial aid. The main reason being is because the whole point of tuition is basically pay what you can pay and come. You can't pay the tuition, like the tuition at this number. We go through FACTS, the financial aid system. Then you will pay that, and just because pay what you can, basically, because we need the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need the money, and we'd like people to enjoy the school.
Yeah.
That's what we like about it.
Yeah.
The biggest problem we've come into with tuition is people not reading the page and not understanding that there's financial aid. People tend to just scan the page and then do nothing, and that's
like is our posted number for how much you have to pay. I think it's like $9,000.
I don't think it's I think
it's like 8,000. But it's like most people don't pay even close to that. And I think people see like, oh, that's a big number. Can't pay that. Bye. And
yeah, you're right, Dylan. The first child is and this is for the entire year, and I think it's divided among the months, right? Is that right, Dylan? It's monthly.
I think so.
Yeah, it's monthly. It's divided, and this is the whole year. So this divided by every month of school. It's $8,959 for the first child, $6,045 for the second child, and $3,029 for each additional child from the same family.
And we just put that there just because if people can't afford that, we just get more money.
I think almost every single student is on financial aid just because of the fact that it is a very high number. Now, if you compare us to other private schools, our tuition is unbelievably low.
Like the other big private schools around us, which we're not saying we're a big private school. There's one, so like the towns around me were all founded by Quakers. for these things called like friend schools,
Oh yeah.
and
I
they're
went
like,
to Penn, so
oh, you went to Penn. Oh wow,
yeah.
yeah. So those are like $25,000 a year,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
there's a really big prep school in Philly. I can't think of it.
I don't know
I
it.
don't know. It's like a men's prep school, and that one is like more than most colleges.
Okay.
It's really crazy. I don't know how people can afford to go there. It's really
Yeah.
insane. So compared to them, we're like very reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. My high school was definitely more than that. But yeah, is it and like is your day structured? Like do you have
No, absolutely not.
classes?
No,
Or?
we have no
Okay.
structure at all.
Wow.
Directed. So have you heard of have you heard of unschooling?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's basically unschooling, but
Okay.
what you just explained. So it's at the building, but it has the resources. So for example, Brian majored in economics. So we'll have a lot of discussions with Brian about economics. Brian, I'm extremely into nutritional science. I want to right now. I want to be a dietitian as a career. I'm thinking about that because I just really like the idea of because I really like the idea of just researching how foods affect the body and especially heart disease and how we can try to, if people want to, I know we were talking about people not wanting to have their lives long, but people who want to have their lives maybe longer, stuff like that. And people who I personally like, I'm terrified of death like you. I don't want to die. It's the last thing I want to do. And right now we can't live forever. And just try to make the best of what we got by trying to, trying to stave off chronic disease. And I just really like that. And Brian has we both have the exact opposite nutritional philosophy. So we argue and debate a lot. This is a staff member. And I like memories of him and I sending studies to each other, like back and forth texting. So yeah, it's very, now it's not fair because I always win, unfortunately, but totally unbiased.
All right. So I was there the whole time, and Brian is very much in like the ketogenic diet. Neil's very much in the vegan diet, and now I'm vegan. So
Dylan was a passive, unbiased observer. If anything, he was a biased observer because he was already eating meat. So if anything, he was biased, and he thought my arguments were superior to that of Brian's. So I'm just saying.
Let's say Brian's argument was that science doesn't prove anything.
And I think to an extent, like science doesn't prove everything, but to say science doesn't prove anything.
Yeah. That seems extreme. Yeah.
Maybe not like, I don't know if I'd say anything, but he said a lot of science doesn't mean anything.
He said nutritional science is basically complete garbage because of genetic variance. And I'm saying, Brian, we take into account genetic variance during studies. I mean, there are studies on genetic variables. I mean, it's not like it's a magical thing. We can point it out in the DNA. This is a gene mutation. This is a gene mutation. And he was also saying because he was trying to exaggerate the difference between, like he was saying that an ideal diet, he was basically a diet for like your like someone who is genetically Caucasian and someone who's genetically Asian. There's a big difference in the diet. I would say, yeah, there's a small one because obviously lactose intolerance is, it's different. It's very different in Asia. Lactose intolerance is a lot higher than in countries than people that their lineage comes from Europe because cows were domesticated very early, became very popular. Whereas in Asia, it's back in the olden days when you couldn't just hop on a plane and go somewhere else. They just did not consume a lot, if any, dairy. So, yeah, but my main argument is that he completely over exaggerates the differences. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We talk about economics a lot. And the best part is, I feel like since you have to go in front of the judicial committee, you have to present an argument. Like you can't, it really teaches, I think, emotional intelligence. What I'm trying to say is like, people don't take personal offense to arguing with arguments. Like people are able to separate their opinions from themselves. I am not my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to say, if you would insult their opinion, saying, I don't know if I agree with that opinion because of this, then a lot of people see it as a personal attack. And Sudbury really helps with that because if you go into a school meeting and you're clearly and there's nothing wrong with being emotional in school meeting. It's just that if you're emotional to the point of you're like, I don't care about the facts. This is like we should pass this because appeal to emotion and stuff like that. It's like, well, we kind of need a logical reason to pass this. And same thing in the judicial committee. If you go in there basically saying all he did this and this and this, and that made me feel like this. Yeah, how you felt is very important, but you also need to demonstrate logically how the people learn this very fast, and it's awesome because there was this one kid who all he'd do when he come to school is he's go outside, he just drag a stick back and forth in the sand, and he was I don't know, he had Dylan, was he I don't want to say his name, but do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, obviously. So I know he was autistic, right? But I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything else. Yeah, and he wouldn't talk to him. He just dragged a stick back and forth in the sand, and you know what we did? Nothing, because that's what he wanted to do. It's like, oh, we're not gonna do anything. Sometimes we'd be like, oh, hey, you want to go on a walk? He'd be like, no. All right. I mean, it's like, and we'll ask anyone. It's like, does anyone want to go on a walk? And we're like, no. Okay. Well, I mean, that's fine. It's up to him. It's completely up to him. And by the end of they moved, and by the end of the time that they were there, he was the speaker of school meeting, dictating when people talk and all that, and he was showing us how into animating he was.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
that's super cool.
Force anyone to do anything. Like,
yeah, that's awesome.
Just giving people the time to be themselves.
Yeah, totally. That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds much better than where I went to school.
Yeah, it's a lot better than most.
It's where you can very healthily, that's a word, right?
Yeah, that's a word.
Express your opinions in a way where you can have opposing opinions, but still appreciate the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely had that before. Like people that have completely different views, but like are still our good friends.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it sounds too like there's a lot of critical thinking that's encouraged.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of self-discipline too. Because you can't just like, I don't want to say like it's unnecessary, but you don't just want to be sitting at your computer watching YouTube videos for 24/7. Like you could do that. I wouldn't.
Yeah, no one's going to stop you, but people seem to think like, so if you take a kid who's stuck in school just listening and listening and listening and listening and listening and listening for the entire day, they go home and all they want to do is just be in their computer and escape on YouTube. It's like, all he does is that. Are you kidding me? He just spent the entire day doing all of this crap that he's not even interested in. And now because he's sitting there just on his computer, oh, well, that's unbelievable. Well, no, I mean, and of course, and when you go, and it takes, I think it's like for every year of public schooling, it takes a month they call it deschooling, a lot of people. It takes a month like to come out of the mentality of, I have to do this, I have to do this. I'm not learning this, and this, and this. By this, I'm going to fail.
Right.
And it's not like you know how, studies to Dr. Riley, who we just had on last, he did a study with Dr. Peter Gray, 2 studies, one with 75 people, one with like 231 families. And the 75 participants one was based on like the, how unschoolers fare. Now, they wanted to study on Sudbury schools, but they're still getting funding on that. Pre-planning phase, basically. But the point is that I think unschooling is similar enough to Sudbury schooling to the point where I think the same study can be viable. I don't think Sudbury schools are going to get a negative. I don't think that's going to happen. So it basically, it was, and the study was just great. And it was only 75 people, which I mean, there are limits to every study, obviously. And I think that would be the 2 limits that they actually pointed out, like in the study, was 1, only 75 people, and 2, since there's no like random pool to take people from, and it was people that were like volunteered, there's obviously, one could make the argument that the only people who volunteered were successful people. But the fact that some of the accounts were very, very similar, I think it shows, and it definitely doesn't show that unschooling and Sudbury schooling is incompatible with the traditional means of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what about yeah, like afterwards, do you feel like there's pressure to go on to more traditional universities, or what
I
do
think there's
most people end
always
up doing?
pressure to do that. I think there's always, I mean, not in Sudbury school. I think in the Sudbury school there's not, but I think in every single other way, there's always pressure to do that.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I personally want to go on to college just because of the fact that I can't really start up my own practice without having a degree.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I can't run my own studies saying that. I know Dylan right now, he wants to be a nurse, and you can't do that without nursing school. So, well, we both have to do that. But I mean, it's less of a, for me, it's less of an obvious I have to do that, and more of a I need to do that to get to where I want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a big difference.
That is a big difference. And not so much for like the prestige or the name, or just this is what people do, as much as like this is your own goal and it's like self-directed.
This is what I want to do, and to do that I need to do this.
And do you want to go to like a public university or like liberal arts college, or do you know like where yet?
So I
Where
want
people tend to go?
So I was thinking I kind of want to go to, and it is kind of, I guess, conforming to say that I want to go to like a mainstream.
Okay.
Just because of the fact, I'm not saying I would be opposed. I'm saying it's just because I feel like I would face the amount of, and there's a difference between ridicule in like careers and ridicule, just personal ridicule.
Totally.
In my career, for having, you have a degree from a fake college, like no matter how unfounded that claim is, if I'm going to get that brand, I'm going to be much less trustworthy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I guess I'm just, is there pressure to go on to the Ivy League or anything like that?
There's always pressure to do that. I feel like for society and everything, there's always pressure. Like I want to get into the best, the Ivy League schools. There's always that.
I think for me, it's like, it's I think for most people it's like if their parents wanted them to be successful, but I think for me it would just be kind of cool to go to an Ivy League school. Like I don't know if it means anything. I don't even think I will, like, or try to. I just think that would be interesting, just to be able to say like, oh yeah, well I went to an Ivy League school. Not to, like, to brag. That was like a bragging voice, but like just for my own I don't know. It's wrong to think like that, but
your own sense of, your own sense of like, I guess, adventure. That sounds like wrong, but
I think maybe my own self of being able to be like, this was like a big goal and I achieved it.
Yeah.
Not because someone told me I had to achieve it. It's like,
Right.
that's a thing that not everyone gets to do. And I think it's really cool that I worked really hard to be able to get to it. And I know like Sudbury also teaches you like a great sense of just like effort. Like even though it seems like, oh, you don't have to do anything, and no one's forcing you to do anything. Like I play this card game, Match the Gathering. I don't know if I said that.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I'm very much into that. And like I play that a lot. Like I probably play every single day, like 3 hours. And I mean, it's just a great sense. It's not because someone told me to. Like if someone forced me to sit down and do, I don't know, 3 hours of, I don't know. I just insert random boring thing here. 3 hours of that, I would be like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. That's so boring every single day for 3 hours. But like, I'm incredibly interested in it, so I'm totally fine doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
I watched I think it was a 4 or 5 hour debate on nutrition, not in one sitting, mind you, because that would just be draining. But I watched like a 5 hour long debate on nutrition, and because I am interested in it, not because I was forced. If I was forced to sit like something that was 5 hours long, I would be like, oh my God, this is just agony.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of funny, but like, so Neil's very much into nutrition, but I'm very much into Magic. Weekly, I'll play like Magic for 5 hours straight. But
oh my God.
But a lot of the time, like maybe like 4 times a year, there's this thing where you can stay overnight, and it's kind of crazy. I don't think there's too many things I would do that for, but I like there's a few times, like a few weeks ago, I played for 12 hours straight. Like just
Wow.
from 5 at night, or like 5 in the afternoon to 5 in the morning.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So that's kind of crazy, but
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
So I like doing that. And it's kind of funny. That it's super nerdy,
It is.
but I think it's really fun.
Yeah.
The game is really fun. It's like very and even like through Sudbury, like I was at my birthday was like I don't know, maybe like last week. I think it was like last week today. Um, like I was just looking at all people that were there, like, and I was like, I would know literally none of these people if I didn't go to this school, if I
Mhm.
didn't drop out of school, if none of these things happened. Like I would know none of them and my life would be completely different. And like I just think about it too sometimes about how like through suffering with my anxiety, how that totally warped my life. Like as I would see it just for myself, I'm not saying this for everyone, but like for myself, I would always prefer like in general to not have the anxiety and
Mhm.
have panic attacks. Like I would just prefer to not have those things.
Mhm.
Um, but like then I look at my life and I was like, without those things, I would have nothing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a wrong thought because I'd be like, well, if you said that, then I could have a completely different life. I'd have something else, but it wouldn't be this. But I'm like, well, I'm incredibly happy with my life I have now.
Mhm.
So it's like without this thing that I think of as bad, I would have none of this good stuff. Like so, the positives completely outweigh the negatives, and it's like
Yeah.
crazy to think how what my life would be without my problems, and how would that work out?
Yeah, for sure.
It was fun, interesting. I'm curious, like I'm always curious what my life will look like in 10 years from now because I don't think it'll look like anything I'm planning. Because I just had this great conversation, like I said,
Yeah.
when we were talking before with this woman, Nicole Coulter. And that was like 20 minutes before we started. And it was really interesting how we were talking about you can't really plan out what your life is going to look like and how you can't really, like we're talking about in the context of starting a business, how you can't just have this like plan that you spent years working on of how the business is going to run because it's not going to go the exact way you think it's going to go and you can't
Yeah.
plan everything out. So like my plan now for the most part is to be a nurse, but like the main goal is just to kind of like from that being a nurse is just a way to achieve something else of like being a self-sustaining farmer. That's like
Mhm.
my main goal.
Oh, cool.
And so
You
the
know what's very
nursing,
interesting? I think that's really cool, and I like is that the fact that you want Dylan like you want to be like completely self-sufficient, like as in no, he doesn't get water from he doesn't buy like water services, he doesn't buy like it's like completely he's disconnected from society in a very and I like that because it's very kind of like it's true self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
I just like the idea of that. I don't think there's any other. I don't know, Dylan. Do you have like another reason you like that, or is just the idea of
no,
that?
I just think that's cool. And maybe part of it, like I had this
Thank you.
idea
It's so
too. I had this idea too for like a Sudbury commune. Like it doesn't have to be just for kids, but mainly it would be for people that like went through the Sudbury experience and came out of it and like came to this commune and we ran it like a Sudbury school, but it was like a Sudbury school for adults. And maybe it doesn't have to be for adults. Like I'm sure kids could go too, but it's like um the commune for Sudbury kids because the idea of a commune has always really fascinated me and how it works and like just communal living in general. I would just think that's so cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
So that's the end goal
Yeah.
to get something like that, which I think is really cool. Like most kids have absolutely no freaking idea what they want to do at all,
Yeah.
and uh like going to college to figure out what you want to do that seems like such a waste of time and money to me. Like
Absolutely.
take a year off or something and figure that out. I know people are doing it like gap years or something, like when you're 19 and you just figure out what you want to do. Like it seems such a waste to spend upwards of like I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
$70,000 isn't crazy for a year of college, and like you're spending that money just so you can think about what you might want to do.
Yeah, that's ridiculous in my opinion. Going to, I mean, I think it's perpetuated by the schooling system that only makes you think about it during your very late
Yeah.
school years. And
Mhm.
it's said, but Sudbury, you literally have all day to think about that. I'm not saying you will think about it every day. I'm saying that you probably will think about it at some point, almost definitely, because this
And
happens with other students.
this was something else I thought was really interesting about college. That like I was listening to this libertarian Peter Schiff on a podcast, and God, he was making a really interesting point about how college students are kind of tricked in this idea of like having cheaper, freer college. And it was very interesting about how, like, now you have people who are out there trying to say that you can have free college, and how the government in the first place had promised kids government loans for college, like college loans, like without question. It's just promising this. It's like, if you vote for me, I'll give you the chance to go to college. And now colleges are smart, and they're like, oh, well, they're guaranteeing these loans to these students that are like, right out of school and just have these big dreams and don't really know what they want to do with their lives, to be totally honest. And so the government gives them these loans, guarantees them the loans, and the colleges take advantage of it. It's like, oh, they guarantee these loans. Let me raise up the prices. We can make more money. It's not an unreasonable thing to think. And I don't think it's all that evil. And then, but the kids are the ones that are stuck with the big debts at the end. And they were just like ambitious kids that are like, oh, this is what I'm just supposed to. I'm supposed to get the college loans and pay off the dets. And that's just how life is supposed to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, and now, so the government creates this problem, and now, like, I don't know. It's so dumb. It's so stupid. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really interesting thing. It's like how the government, at first, to get the votes that they wanted, like for people to, it's like, I'll promise you, I'll guarantee you these loans. And then it's like, I'll guarantee you that you never have to pay these loans, and college is really cheap. But like before college loans, I mean, college isn't all that expensive because, the government isn't guaranteeing every single child the opportunity to go to school. Or not every single child, but essentially every single child.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just interesting. Yeah, the pressure to like go to college or and also the pressure to like, it's very weird how like, people are discouraged from knowing what they want to do.
I think it's truly evil, the fact that like how the government almost, like, there's classes in schools about why you should go to college, and it's almost like this is the government factory essentially telling their people what they should know and to go to college. And the government, like, college loans are a pretty sweet deal for the government because it's almost like a guaranteed loan. For them, they just they just get interest. It's like a whole business, but they don't have to do anything because they're just printing the money. It's like this whole circle of like evil. So you're telling your kids that you have to go to college in this place where you influence literally every single child that is born in your country, and you tell them what they should do. It's like, it's like, all right, here's an idea. It's like McDonald's running every single school and influencing every single child, and then they have this class saying you can only eat at McDonald's and you can only ever eat at McDonald's.
And
that's the only acceptable way. And then kids go and eat at McDonald's all the time. McDonald's is happy.
Come home after a long day at school and your parents say you better be eating at McDonald's, honey.
So
you know how corrupt, like, evil that is.
It is. I think it also just like puts a lot of pressure on kids. I think there's just more and more pressure to compete and succeed and like in this mainstream like college system. I know for my school it was like a lot of pressure to go to an Ivy League or go to like a college that like had a really good name. I feel like that's really problematic too. It creates a lot of stress.
And look, you don't need to go to college to be successful. I mean, people might say it's a false analogy to claim that McDonald's, you're comparing McDonald's, it's a false analogy. No, it's not, because you don't need to go to college to be successful. It's all dependent on, on if you want to, on what your definition of success is.
Right. And
that's different for everybody. Now, look, I mean, statistically speaking, people who don't graduate from college this is statistically make the average person who doesn't graduate from college makes much less money than the average person who did. Homeless rates are much lower. This, that, the other is much lower. But that doesn't mean that you're going to immediately end up on this. People seem to think that if you don't go to college, you're immediately just scrubbing toilets. And why is that even a bad thing too? I mean, we need plumbers. If there were no plumbers, who would be there to plumb?
Being a plumber is a great job. I think they did a study that like the average plumber makes more than the average
plumbers make a lot of money. Like trade jobs are very awesome. My uncle, he's a plumber, and I know he makes a pretty penny.
I also think it's really frustrating how we like devalue certain jobs. Like I feel like plumbers are really like plumbers and like trade jobs like that. They're really devalued. They probably save more lives like plumbers than like a lot of other people. Like, I don't know. I think, having good plumbing is important to your health,
My uncle, he always talks about how there should be more trade jobs because it's like,
Totally.
it's totally open market that no one's taking advantage of because I don't know, people just don't want to do the work. But like, it's not like it's not, I don't even say, I don't know from experience, but he's like it's a whole market that's completely open and lots of jobs and
I don't know that people don't want to do the work. I think that people are like told that these are not valuable, that they won't be valued.
I don't think it's that people don't want to do the work. I think it's because people are told that you should not do the work.
I mean, I will just say for me, like, not that I wanted a trade job, but I wanted something more, stable or steady. I wanted to be a teacher, a social worker. And my parents were like so against that because they saw it as like not a prestigious job. And they saw it as, like not using my intellectual potential to the best of my ability and not valuable. So like all these things that I think go into like why people choose certain jobs or not that like could lead to a really stable life. Yeah,
I think that's really interesting.
So you should probably move into closing statements, by the way, because it's 7 minutes.
And I'm getting hungry.
Emily, you want to go first then?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to learn about like alternative forms of school. I think compulsory schooling has a lot of parallels with the mental health system and with just like oppressive institutions in general. So it's really cool to learn about ways to get educated outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go next. I do think it's really awesome to hear more about people that are out there like advocating for mental illness. That's like, I just think that's really awesome. Just people out advocating for anything for their views instead of just, staying inside and not wanting to share their point of views.
Totally.
Yeah, so I'll go last then. I think that, I guess, my closing statement would probably be, this was definitely awesome because I didn't know a lot about, because we didn't just talk about the mental health industry. I didn't know a lot about, I'll use an example of the mental health industry and, those kinds of things. And I was eager to come on here to learn about that. And so, that was awesome. And I guess as a advice to everyone, I would say, this wasn't very related, but it was kind of related. I just want to say, because this is a very important thing, because we were having a discussion, and I think in having a discussion, it's very important to separate yourself from your opinions. And I think in very personal topics because we got into some very personal topics, I believe, and I think it's very important to separate yourself from your opinions. And if someone's disagreeing with you, it's not necessarily a personal attack. Now it can be if you say, "Hi, I'm a person and I would like to exist." No. Then that's a personal attack. I'm saying like an opinion and the reason is that I'm saying this is because if we need to change, we need to be able to at least attempt to talk to each other in a civilized manner, like we try to do at Sudbury School meeting, without attacking each other personally.
And that's what's really cool about this format too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just sorry to do this. I would just say I'm really interested in what gets defined as disagreement and what gets defined as personal attack. Because I do think that saying someone's body or someone's way of being is unhealthy or denying that a certain type of oppression happens to them, that is a personal attack. And you can say it in the most neutral, nice way. And it's an attack. And I have an article about this that you can include in the notes or whatever, about how it takes a lot of privilege to not get emotional and not have a stake in the hunt and not, think about and not react to something. It usually means you're not personally affected by it. But if you are personally affected by something, then you're probably going to react more. And I actually think that reaction can be super valuable for a discussion. So
I don't know because I feel like if we're going to, I'll just say this one last thing and then we actually really do need to go for 3 minutes until I didn't know we'd be able to talk this much, but I feel like if we're going to now, even if it is something like saying someone's way of doing something is unhealthy, I mean, if we're defining healthy by like a certain standard, like being able to live to a certain extent without suffering A, B, and C chronic diseases, I feel like we need to find a way to present those facts without attacking someone. Because I mean, it's like we do have studies for a reason. I mean, the body does have like, certain, if something happens to we need to be able to try to present those facts in a way that doesn't actually harm anybody, obviously, or offend anyone. But I feel like even trying not to present those facts, because there are clearly things in scientific studies that show what is right, what is, if you want, considering health. I'm being very clear here. Only considering, and I'm defining health, because I know you can define health in different ways. I'm defining health as being able to prolong your life best reasonably possible. Physical health. Being able to prolong your life, reasonably, and being able to have a healthy life without suffering various chronic diseases. And I think that we should be able to try to present those facts in a way that isn't offending anyone. But I feel like we should present those facts because I feel like everyone has the right to know what different things.
Yeah. I really like this one quote that like what's so great about podcasts.
Yeah, after that, we should probably
after I say so, I think what's so great about podcasts is like the spread of information is the enemy of ignorance.
Yeah, and while we need to try to make sure not to, because it's bad to offend people. That's such an obvious statement. Obviously, we should also, I think, try to, like Dylan said, the spread of information. I think we just really need to try to stomp out ignorance everywhere, and that also includes telling people what offends people and how to avoid that. And I don't know if we have 1 minute left. Does anyone want to say something in that 1 minute?
No, I'm done. I guess we would just say thank you so much for coming on, Emily.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Actually, you want to say anything? It's like 30 seconds. Like, you want to say anything?
No. Okay. Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. Dylan, do you want to say anything?
No.
All right, awesome. So, all right. So thank you for watching, and thank you, Emily, this was awesome. I don't think we've ever had an episode where we've been so right on the clock to want to keep talking. All right. So thank you for watching, everyone, and goodbye.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.